On this week's episode of Casual Watch Talk podcast, we go over our watch obsessions, and then we dive into our main subject: what watches would we buy if we were starting from scratch as new collectors and we had $1,000 to spend, $5,000, or over $10,000 to spend? What watches would we pick? Keep listening to find out more. Hi everyone, welcome back to Casual Watch Talk podcast. You're joined again by Todd. How have you been?
I've been fantastic. How about you, Sam?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. Been an interesting week. It's been a bit light on the news, but we think we've got quite a good subject to go over. Sure. But before we do that, shall we do a quick wristwatch check? I'll let you go first.
Absolutely. And I brought out a classic today, and I can't believe this one still works. I don't know a lot about how solar watches function. I've understood that the capacitor in these will go bad around 20 years. However, this G-Shock G7000D, it's a tank of a watch. It's a beast. I've had it for at least 30 years. I've seen pictures of it that I've been wearing it with the kids when they were very little at Disney World, and it is still keeping time. I keep it in the window every day. It's right on track, and it's a tank. I've taken it everywhere. I've been camping with it, chopping wood, brutal with it, and then to the beach with the family and the water. And I didn't even particularly worry about sand even getting into these button recesses. And yet this watch is just keeps going. So I kind of smile every day when I keep an eye on it. I check it and yep, nope, it's still running. I'm waiting for that day where it's like, oh, it finally died, but it's been rocking and rolling for a long time. I'm really happy with this watch.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Yeah, that's always cool, isn't it? There's still something from my childhood, the romance around those original G-Shocks.
Oh, yeah. And it was an all stainless steel one, too, originally. At least the head is it's a big, heavy, chunky watch. And when I bought it, I was like, this is the last watch I'll ever buy. Famous last words for the watch collector, but I was like, this watch will last me forever, and so far it has.
Well, I'm wearing my Bremont. This is my Bremont Supermarine, and I've got it on a NATO here because I managed to get those curved spring bars with the quick release curved spring bars, which it's completely changed the watch now. They're quite secure in there. They've got the quick release, but I can easily get NATO straps on there now, which I just couldn't before. It was crazy how close the spring bars are to the lugs. But yeah, I've got my little Bremont on there.
Nice.
I've been trying to switch up my watches, so I've been trying to wear different ones each day so that I don't fall into the I'm not wearing this one, I need to sell it habit.
Well, it's easier for you. You've pared down your collection considerably. What are you down to, 8 or 9 watches?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, 4 I inherited, and then about four or five. Yeah, about 4 that I wear regularly. One of which is a Garmin.
Yeah.
Well, have you had a watch obsession this week?
Yeah, and it's a really weird one. Oh, I forgot to send this one over to you for you to look at, but I'm going to send it to you now. The watch is called the Alto Art 01 or Art 01. I'm not sure how they're classifying it, but it's a monochrome release. And what's interesting is a former Cartier senior watch designer has moved over to this indie brand, and you can see sort of the minimalist aesthetic there, but this watch is at a whole other level of modernism, and yet like an art piece that, on the wrist, it is striking. I don't know how easy it is to tell time on it. It's one of those kind of watches without too much indication of the indices or where you have to kind of approximate where time you can figure it out. But what a stunning watch, and it just looks so deep. It's got these beveled edges even on the sapphire crystal. It is just way outside my price range. The speculated price is somewhere around $25,000, so not ever going to be in my collection. But man, is this a good looking watch. And the movement, it's almost better looking if you had the movement side up with the micro rotor and the way they've built the architecture to hold the various gears, and looks like the power reserve. Just a stunning watch.
Yeah, to explain this a little bit for the audio listeners, what shape is that? It's a rectangle with shaved off corners.
It's definitely a tonneau case, but it's like a really brutalist, modernistic version of one. Hard to describe. Hexagonal, maybe?
Yeah.
Like a weird hexagonal case, I would say.
Yeah, and it's got the dial looks almost as if it's going into infinity, doesn't it? It's stepped down as if it's almost like a Colosseum. Roman sort of Colosseum seating.
Yeah, it creates such an illusion. Actually, I want to scroll down and see if they have anything on the specs. Let's see the specs. I was curious how thick it is, but I don't see that information.
Looks
but what
I'll leave a link in the show notes, but certainly on that model's wrist, it's definitely got a wrist presence to it.
Oh, it's big side to side. I think they said it was 41 millimeter. And when you have that shape of case, 41 millimeters is substantial. Like it's dominant, but I'm curious just how thick it is, because the illusion of that step down, it looks so deep, and yet I think that it's just tricking the eye.
Yeah, no, it looks awesome. It's wild, isn't it? The back has got the same machined sapphire crystal as the front.
Yeah.
Excellent. No, that's a great pick. My watch obsession has been, I've been obsessing for some reason about old quartz watches and old Breitlings, because I was chatting to Luke over at Frog Squad Straps. He makes these nylon straps, military style nylon straps in Australia. He's been on the show a couple of times, actually. He's in the medical profession. Whenever I did a Boulder medical watch, and he commented on whether it would be useful or not. The reason I mention it is on the Instagram, he keeps of this old Breitling Pluton, which looks proper 80s, but it's actually from the 90s. And I just love the look of them. They don't seem to be too bad a price. It's an Annie Digi watch, but they look to have quite a nice wrist presence and stuff like that. So I might just keep an eye on them and see whether ones come up, because I do like my Breitling Annie Digis. I had the B1, which was a bit of a chunk, but I did still like it. So I still have a soft spot I'm going for a bit of a quartz revival. I was chatting to Ryan over at Veya because he's got a quartz watch. I said, oh, send us the quartz version of this new watch for review. And he's like, oh, we're doing a mechanical soon. And I'm like, well, actually, I would prefer to do the quartz. He's like, oh, that's interesting. And then I referred back to the conversation we had a few weeks ago about whether more micro brands should be using quartz.
I've been thinking a lot more about that since our conversation, and it's all Jody's fault, so we can blame him. Yeah, the soulless watches are starting to really catch my eye. Like, it's something that I'm like, I don't mind having that as a part of my collection. And I actually sometimes I leave the house at 5 a.m. I got an early start that day, and I don't necessarily want to wear the watch that I've had on overnight, and I'm going, man, it would be nice to just grab one of those, slap it on, and go. And I do that sometimes because it's just a matter of convenience. And I know it's heresy to the watch collecting nerds of the world, but I'm starting to kind of fall in love with quartz. Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I never thought I would see the day. I've always appreciated quartz, actually, but I definitely, when I first started out, I was sort of a little bit dismissive of it. Again, as if it was, but when you really work out those high precision quartz movements, I think they're sometimes as interesting as mechanical movements. Oh yeah, especially when they have that sweeping seconds like that, where it's just, it's sweeping seconds better than any 4 hertz movement. It just glides around the dial, and it's something very mesmerizing about it. Let's dive into our main subject for the podcast, which is if we had to start again with watch collecting, start from a blank slate, or if we could go back and tell our past selves, hey, this is what you should get, what would we buy? So we've set ourselves a little category of, if we were starting again, what would we buy if we had $1,000 to spend? And then if we're starting again and we had $5,000 to spend, what we would do? And then if we had more than $5,000, what would we collect? So let's each do our $1,000 one, and then we'll take it in turns. But do you want to start with your $1,000 one? Yeah, and it's going to be one that's a perpetual favorite. People are going to be like, oh, whatever, obvious choice. But I'm going to tell you, this is one of those ones, especially I wish I had bought the original versions of it, and it's that Seiko Alpinist with the green dial and the brown strap. It's currently available as the SBB 121, 39.5 millimeter. And, there's all those conversations like, a green watch doesn't go with everything. And that's bunk. And it is easily, at that price point, one of the coolest watches you can wear. And you can wear it as an everyday watch in every scenario. It's 200 meters of water resistance. It's small on the wrist. It has a date window, Sam, so you'll be happy with that. The compass, again, is one of those features we talked about in the last one. It's a nice to have, but it's sort of a useless feature for me. It's like a fiddle feature, which is nice, but it's such a good looking watch. And I've said it may have said this before. My son got that as a gift from my mother. It was like something she wanted to get him something special, and she didn't know how special it was when she bought it for him. He just was like, I like this watch. When I see that watch on his wrist, I get, no pun intended, green with envy every time. It is a beautiful watch. It's one of those sleeper watches. When you see it in the metal, you're like, man, that is a win all day long.
I've got a couple of options for this, but I think I can still get each option under 1,000. I think if I was going to start again and I wanted a watch for anything, if I wanted a watch or a watch collection for anything, I probably would go with a brand that I've loved reviewing them over the years, and I think the watch is a really good value for money, and that is Weye. And Weye do a solar quartz dive watch, 42 millimeters. They've got a blue version, they've got a black version, and if you have that with the bracelet, it's coming in around the $450 mark. It's an all-rounder because not only is it a dive watch, so it has those dive watching chops to it, but it's also quite dressy as well. It's not a brutalist design of a dive watch, so I think that would be a really good pick for $450, and then you'd have a little bit of change. But you could also add in maybe another Seiko diver into that to get you up to 1,000, or if you wanted to just stick with Weye, they do also do a field watch as well, which would obviously mix up the look, and then they do dressier sort of watches as well. What I like about American assembled versions as well, so if you're a fan of that, they try and assemble some of the watches in a plant in Arizona. So yeah, I would probably go with a Weye dive watch if I was starting again, just because it's got a really classy sort of minimalist look.
I think you accidentally sent me that on the WhatsApp, and I was kind of drooling over that watch. And you took it away. You deleted the message, but when I saw that, I thought, this is a very good looking watch. There's something, they've handled the indices well, and I think the numerals on the bezel make it look more dressy, subtle, and a little bit diminutive. I don't know how to, they're not in your face, but.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is the D4 Meridian Navy US Solar watch. They also do a mechanical as well, so you could go for a mechanical, and that is still under $1,000.
I'm gonna interrupt you. So I'm with you. I think go back, and I hope that doesn't upset Weye when I say it, but they've got a watch there that a lot like a Nomos. And I thought, boy, there's a nice 2-watch collection from Weye for under $1,000. It's got those vibes, that very cool minimalist design, and it's $299. It's got to be. Oh, it's solar. That is a cool watch, Sam.
Well, yeah, I just recently reviewed their Dirty Dozen. They have a Dirty Dozen quartz watch, and the good thing about their Dirty Dozen watch, I know a lot of people complain about the size of the Dirty Dozen watches because they're sort of 36 or smaller. They do a 36, but they also do a 40 mil, and then they also do one that is this AmeriQuartz, which is a movement that is an American quartz movement. So it's assembled in a quartz movement that's assembled in America. It's called the AmeriQuartz. So they do that version with the small seconds, and then they also do a mechanical version of this. One of the things with Weye that's awesome is that most of their models have either a quartz, sometimes they have 2 quartz versions, sometimes they have an American assembled quartz, and then one that they probably have assembled in China, I'm guessing, and then they usually have the same model with a mechanical movement as well. So their Dirty Dozen, they do a mechanical, they do a quartz, and then they do a 36 and a 40 as well, so if you like that Dirty Dozen look. And then they do a lot of really nice field watches as well.
Yeah, they're handsome watches. That whole page that's good looking stuff. What's the movement in that Dirty Dozen Swiss automatic one? What are they putting in there?
Sellita SW260, which is not bad for $1,000.
Oh, interesting. No, I'm saying that is a great look. It reminds me a lot of, there's a Hamilton that looks a lot like that too.
Yeah, and this is truly an American brand started by Ryan and Reagan, 2 surfers, and they started with the field watches. Amusingly, you would think they would start with the dive watches, but they started with a field watch, and I don't know if they still do it, but their thing was that they guaranteed the water resistance because they were sick of buying watches that were supposed to be surf watches, and then they would always suffer from water ingress or whatever, so they actually guaranteed their water resistance. And they've got a lot of friends who are divers and things like that, so they've got some really cool pictures of them surfing on the website, on their friends diving and stuff like like that. They did some videos with a free diver who took one of their watches down. So really interesting company.
You've mentioned them a lot on the podcast and on the live stream, and you're definitely getting my attention. It's not a brand that's usually on my radar, but I really like what they've been doing lately. I like that other one I'm looking at. Oh, here we go. We're going down a rabbit hole, everybody. Sorry, join us. That looks a lot like a Breitling Super Ocean.
This one. Yeah, this is actually based on an old Breitling watch. This with the roulette date disc. Yeah, I've reviewed this one on the channel. I had this. They sent me this one in for review, and I reviewed it on the channel. It's a really good looking watch.
I'd buy that in a quartz. They have the quartz version
You know
of that.
what? I don't think they do actually. I think that's one that I've often wondered whether they would do. I think because of that roulette date wheel. I think it's just in a mechanical. Awesome. Well, that was our $1,000 category. Let's move on to if we were big spenders and we were coming out wanting to start a collection again and we had $5,000. What would you spend your $5,000 on?
Everybody's going to roll their eyes at me, and I know I am predictable and I'm boring, and this is what I like. If I was starting fresh, it's definitely one of these brand new Black Bay GMTs in that burgundy and black dial. And there are so many reasons why. 39 millimeter case, that amazing bracelet. And then, I mean, I've actually had the opportunity to use their customer service for a warranty issue. Wonderful customer service. At least for me, that was my experience. Cost me nothing to ship. And it came back with a cool little Tudor travel case that I wasn't expecting. I was pleasantly surprised when that happened. And now on top of it, we're getting into their COSC and METAS certified movement. So everything you could possibly want in a watch. And this is the GMT version of it. I think I mentioned that. 200 meters of water resistance. We've talked about this before on my aversion to vintage watches, which is not because of vintage. It's that water resistance is something that's important, if you're just wearing it as a daily wear watch. And if I'm spending that much money, this is a daily wear watch for me. This is the one I'm all in on. So I want to be able to wear it on all situations. It's got that T-fit clasp. Amazing. People could hate on it and say, oh, you could get this or that, and it's more watch for the money. And it's like, I love the look of that watch, and I would wear that watch every day.
This definitely is if you were going for a Tudor watch and you wanted one that had everything, because it is also a GMT watch as well, which is they're hard to quite rare, aren't they? GMT master chronometers. You don't find a lot of them because I think the GMT movement, certainly the Sellita and stuff like that, I think it's quite hard to regulate them to get them within the spec, is my understanding anyway. But this is a great all-rounder, isn't it? I like this. I would be interested in I'm not sure if I personally like the color scheme of this one, because it's sort of like a Coke, isn't it? Gilt Coke.
It sort of is. It's almost more like Dr. Pepper. I don't know how to describe it. It's off a little, and I get what you're saying, but that would absolutely work with a suit, with t-shirt and jeans. I think there's no time I think that you're going to look out of place wearing that watch. Yeah, maybe in a tuxedo.
This is the problem with Tudor, and in fact a couple of other brands, isn't it? You can't really tell the watch is going to look like before on their website. They don't do a great picture. They just put renders on there, which I think they should put more action shots, more live shots.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's one of those, like, the upside is they're not as hard to see at a boutique as maybe some Rolex at this point. So, I mean, I've held this, I've put it on the wrist, and I'm, as everybody who listens already knows, I'm an avid Tudor fan. So I have other Tudors. I know what to expect, and I just know it's going to be a gorgeous watch. I think the only thing that might take that over the top is if they had that new, which I don't know is available on this, that Jubilee style bracelet they made would be killer with this, but great watch.
Yeah, so this is the Black Bay 58 GMT with the Coke style color scheme with the gilt hands, and also it looks like it's got a bit of Fotina on the bezel as well, or gilt on the bezel.
Yeah.
I wonder if this would look awesome I wonder if they'll do different color schemes for watches and wonders. I wonder how much of a hit this was for them.
Yeah, that would be I'd be curious, because they have been going crazy with that chronograph, haven't they? They've got that new one and the kind of turquoise blue, and they've done the pink this year, and they're going all over the place with that chronograph. But they've stayed pretty traditional, staid style, kind of like Big Brother Rolex of this is what men wear, color schemes. They haven't gone real wild, but yeah, it would be cool to see what they might do with it. A polar dial would be killer. A polar dial would be killer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, for my 5,000, I've been a bit naughty, and I think I can get 3 watches, a 3-watch collection for 5,000. Well, I can easily get a 3-watch collection for 5,000, but I'm thinking about me if I was starting again, what I would probably spend it on. I think, first off, for a dive watch, even though I think they're very, very expensive for what they are, I would probably go with a Quartz CWC Royal Navy diver. I would go with that, and then because that's about 600 UK, so I'm guessing that's around 700 US. So that would be my dive watch, would be a Quartz CWC diver. I do like CWC as a brand. They've obviously got that British military connection as well. They've got the Royal Navy connection on this one. Also, it's sort of a thing celebrating the military without having military insignia on there, which I always feel weird about because I didn't serve myself, but very grateful for all those people that did. So I don't like it if it's got military insignia on there. But this one is, just that classic dive watch, and something that I wore a CWC watch for a long time.
Then my cosplay as an operator.
Yes, I know. Then my second one, which I'm hoping that I can get all of this in under the 5,000, but it would have to be a Christopher Ward. It would have to be for the GMT. It would have to be the Dragonfly GMT. I know you've got this one in white.
Yep, that is. Even my wife says, I love when you wear that watch. Like, it is just such a good looking watch. I can't say anything bad about it. And that Dragonfly is beautiful. I know you kind of almost fell in love with it when you had it in for review.
I really did.
I'm surprised you didn't end up buying it, because man, is that a great watch.
Yeah, I'm surprised. It's still always on my list. It's still one that I always come back to. I was always a little bit worried about the 39mm size, but I remember when I had it that it wasn't that small on the wrist. It still has a wrist presence.
They got a little bit of that Rolex magic going, where it's like you're wearing a 39, but it doesn't feel small. They've done a wonderful job with it. You know when it feels small, which is really funny, is when I put mine on the leather strap, and suddenly it feels like a much smaller watch. But when you wear it on the bracelet, it seems like it's something more substantial.
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? For some reason, I don't know if they're having a delay on the Consort bracelets, but it's immediately available if you just want it on the Beta bracelet. But that new Consort bracelet looks like you wait until April to get it on the Consort.
I think that's been a popular release for them. It is a great looking bracelet. I just wish it wasn't. That's in butterfly clasp, right?
It is, but it does have a little bit of an extension on it.
That's right. Yeah, I just, because they were one of the early ones to the game with that on the fly adjustment that I absolutely love on the one that I have. I've used it several times, often in the summer when, my wife and I like to go for like a long walk. And I don't know if it's because, you're walking and your hands are kind of hanging at the side in addition to the warmth, but my wrist definitely swells up. Having that adjustment in there has been a lifesaver. I mean, literally, I went down and my wrist was like getting squeezed, and I'm like, man, I gotta swap it, and it was immediately comfortable.
Yeah. And then for my final one, if I was going for a bit more dressy, sort of sporty watch, although I suppose that GMT is definitely a sporty watch. I can only find these on Chrono, but they vary in price. So I'm going to allow 2,000 for this, even though this one on Chrono is 1,374. It's probably the only Grand Seiko that I would seriously consider buying again, and it's one that's in that classic Grand Seiko case, and it's the quartz, one of the heritage quartz ones that they have with the blue dial. So it's got that high precision quartz movement in. It's just the right mix of sort of dressy and sports watch. I think this is probably what I should have bought when I was going for a Grand Seiko, because this is the look that I like. I've probably got a bit too ambitious, but I would certainly consider, if I was doing that again, buying one of these quartz 9F quartz.
Have you had one of those? Have you worn one of those? Because I know you've had issue with the I'd be curious if it's got that top heavy issue that you don't like. It's a great looking watch, and that blue one at that price is what's going on there?
There's some great deals on Grand Seiko from Japan. Even the one with the black dial is at a decent price as well. I mean, you have to be careful of the links coming from Japan, because sometimes if they don't come with all the links, they can be quite slim fitting the bracelet, so you just have to be careful of that. But I think if I were Seiko again, I would probably go for something like that. I think I was a bit foolish because I was worried about the lume on it. That's why I didn't go for one of those originally, but the hands are so well polished that I don't think you really need the lume on it.
I think that would be an easier link to try to pick up if you ended up with one that was a little tight than some of the other more obscure ones. Like that one you might be able to source without too much trouble. Great looking watch. You know, I just saw something there while you're looking at Chrono 24, which goes right back to me kicking myself from our conversation last week. There was a Tag Heuer Formula One chronograph up there, and it was over $2,000 for the.
Oh, wow.
That wasn't even $2,000 new.
That's rare that you get the tag as an investment.
Yeah. What is this? Look at that's the one I had.
Oh, yeah, $1,780 for the Tag Formula One quartz. This is the sort of, I suppose this is their classic design now, isn't it? The blue and orange.
Yeah, I love that one, and I can't believe how much that price has spiked, which is an indication what we talked about. They are having a resurgence for sure.
Yeah, they're definitely. I've definitely noticed more people talking about Tag now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, next up is we were starting out, and we had a real wad of cash this time. You know, you're 10 grand and above. What would you go for?
Yeah, well, I'm right at $9,900. It's this Omega Seamaster Aquaterra chronometer. Wow. Chronometer GMT World Timer 43. That one is beautiful. I love the carved earth on the dial. I love a world timer. There's just something sort of romantic about that world timer function. And I mean, come on, it's going to have all the things that you want from Omega as far as high quality movement. What are we? 150 meters of water resistance. So again, this is an everyday, all the time, everywhere watch. And I saw one of these actually. We went to visit, my son and I went to Teddy's showroom over here in Ohio up at Crocker Park, and having that in hand, it made that want even stronger because these are beautiful watches, just beautiful watches in person. And I would take one of those in a minute if I had $10,000 to throw around.
I haven't asked you about that since you visited. We haven't gone into any depth, but you visited Teddy's brick and mortar store.
Yeah. It was he was having an event, and unfortunately I can't remember which brand, what the event was for, because I was sort of it was my first time to visit there, but apparently he does fairly frequently. He does brand showcases, and it was really a nice event. They had sort of like being at a gallery opening for art. I mean, they had a little bit of beer and wine. They had some food available, just like finger foods. And it's not a huge store. I mean, just everybody was so friendly, so approachable. Teddy posed for a picture with my son. That was, he was like, yeah, sure, we'll take pictures. And they were very amenable to letting, you kind of pretty much take out and handle anything in the cases. There was definite security present, which was kind of funny. They're watching everything that's happened at both ends of the store. But it was a wonderful time, I'll tell you. And you could cut this, Sam, if you want. But it was a funny experience. I was in there, and there was clearly a well-to-do father, and he wanted to buy a nice gift for his son, and the son couldn't be more disinterested in everything that was going on, and I was just getting irritated. And his father had picked out, I don't know what kind of a watch, but there was nothing in the showroom that they were looking at. It was less than $5,000, and the son's response was, I don't want to wear a watch like my dad wears. And I was like, it just broke and hurt my soul, And then the kids sort of just hanging around out front. The dad was desperately still trying to find him a gift. And he walked outside, and I think it was an Omega Aquaterra.
Wow.
He's like, yeah, I guess I guess I like that. And they went back into the store, and I was like, somebody hurt me now, or I need to be adopted by that guy. Because Dad, I'll take whatever watch you want to get me from this store.
Oh, I think this is bringing back perhaps my father's disappointment that I never got into fly fishing, and he didn't have a fly fishing buddy to go with.
Yeah, same thing. I was just like, what's happening right now?
It's funny. I worked with a guy, Jason, a great guy, and he was super into racing, and he had a little Miata, and Mazda Miata that it was racing spec, essentially, roll cage and everything in it. And he would take it racing on like NASCAR tracks and other race tracks. And he was keeping it. He had a young son. He's like, I'm keeping it for my son. And I used to joke with him all the time. I'm like, I promise you, he will not be interested when he grows up. He will not. You will have kept it for all of those years. And then he'll be like, what's this old car from the 80s?
Well, what happens with kids is they go through arcs, though, right? So when they're like 16, 17, 18, they don't want to have anything to do with what dad's doing, right? But then they cross over, like, oh, you know what? Dad wasn't completely crazy. I kind of like that now. We've had that sort of that fun thing happening in our house recently because I'm a Texan out of place living here in Ohio. Let me put it that way. I'm a wannabe Texan. I like to wear Western style clothes. I have for most of my life, and my sons always make fun of me. They tease me about it. And all of a sudden, guess what they're starting to wear? All of a sudden, cowboy boots started showing up, and then the shirt, the jacket. Yeah. And also, then they're looking at my hat like, that's a good looking hat. And I'm like, you have made fun of me. But, so the kids go through that arc, and then they finally come back around. So if he holds on to the Miata long enough, I have hope for him.
Well, maybe that's why my dad's holding on to his collection of guitars. I mean, I'm 45 this year, so he's don't know how much longer he's gonna have to wait. But yeah, his fly fishing gear. But he's really into photography as well, which is interesting considering I started doing a YouTube channel as well. So maybe there is that sort of creative elements brushed off it, if not so specific.
There you go. Okay.
So if I was going to spend my 10,000 plus, I always sort of struggle with this because I know I probably wouldn't spend it all on one watch, having had watches that are that expensive, and I don't know whether I'd necessarily enjoy. I'm not like a showy off person, but I think if I had plus 10 grand, I think you've got to go. Honestly, I think you've got to go kind of Rolex path. So I would probably go Rolex GMT, maybe a Batman. I probably wouldn't do Pepsi. I'd probably do a Batman. Maybe if I could get it's a little bit more at like 14 grand if I could get the Yachtmaster, the titanium. I still got a hankering for that watch. But maybe also you could go Speedmaster as well, the bi-compact Speedmaster with the date on it.
In all honesty, I would probably go down that path too, but I was trying to break out of my predictable mold for this conversation. And what would I do other than that? But there's just something just classic, perfect. You're going to love if you're getting into that Rolex like that, and you're going to love it. I mean, it's not even about, it is so not about the clout or the showy offiness. That's going to happen. People are going to, ooh, Rolex, but you're really going to enjoy that watch. There's no question.
There is such a weird paradox with Rolex, isn't it? Because again, maybe it's the same with quartz. When I first started off, I was like, oh, I'm not really feeling quartz anymore, even though I wore a quartz watch more of my life than I've ever worn a mechanical watch. But the same with Rolex. It's like, oh, I don't really know if I like a Rolex, and I always, for a long time, I was like, no, it's not worth buying one. And then I went to Bob's Watches and I started handling them, and I'm like, oh, actually these are, it isn't marketing shtick. Yeah. They actually wear really well in the bracelets. And then I got my hold on a few vintage ones, and it was funny, the reason I bought the first Rolex was, and this sounds awful to say, but it was from that investment sort of aspect of, oh, this is a store of value, because I had an old colleague who I was chatting to, still very good friends with him. He got really into investing in gemstones, so not jewelry per se, but sort of rubies and sapphires. He sort of speculate on rare stones. So there's these people that are these which I'm guessing is one of the, if you do geology at university, there's probably only a few avenues you can go down, but one of these is like a sort of a Indiana Jones gem hunting type person. And they go all over the world, and they go to these mines where there's just this one type of gem, and they all like the opal mines in Australia, and they source these super rare and then they put them back into this investing pool, and you actually do get the gemstones. And I think it's the same with anything, with coin collecting, with watch collecting and stuff like that, that you got rarity and clarity. And so he was chatting to me about it, and then he's like, do you want to join in? Do you want me to make an introduction? And I was like, do you know what, I don't understand enough about this, and the level of mental effort it would take for me to learn a completely new hobby, to work out whether this is it not a scam, but is it something you can't really make up? You can't really, and if you're just investing in it, it's more like a speculative long-term thing, then you've really got to enjoy owning it. So he asked me sort of, well, what do you know then in terms of alternative investments? I was like, well, watches really well, and that's what got me thinking about, hey, should I buy a Rolex? And that's when I bought one. I mean, I haven't kept it, so it's not really a good investment.
And Rolex, but we talked about this, I think, on the live stream. Rolex is one of those ones too that has a very interesting, like quartz, like you said, where there's this bell curve. And initially it's like, oh, everybody's going to get a Rolex. Rolex is the best watch brand in the world. Rolex is the most expensive watch you could buy. As they collect, they're like, oh, I don't like Rolex. Rolexes are terrible. And only people who wear Rolexes are like real estate agents and car dealers. And, it's like, it's that. And then as you start collecting longer, you start going, actually, the hype is legit. Like that's I will quantify that their pricing has gotten a little wonky. Pricing's getting crazy now. It's a legit, there's a reason they are who they are, because that product.
It's interesting. And you do get this a bit with Tudor as well, where this is one of the other interesting things with watch collecting, isn't it? Where you have a stainless steel watch that is, I know Rolex using a higher grade stainless steel, but it doesn't make it feel any better. It just gives it a bit more luster. You wouldn't think, if you weren't into watches, that watches with a stainless steel case can feel all across the spectrums when you pick them up. You would think, oh, it's metal, it's going to feel a certain way, but it's amazing how the wearability, and when you pick up a Rolex or I would say Tudor, and there's a few other brands as well, where you pick them up and you almost feel it in your hand, the way it's machined. The Christopher Ward Lightcatcher case is the same thing with the bracelet, and you hold it in hand and you're like, wow, this is magic the way it feels. But it's only just like machines slightly different. Probably there's microns difference between that and another watch, but just the decades of perfecting the design, which is why part of the reason I really dislike homage watches that try and rip off Rolex, because they've spent decades and decades perfecting minute changes so that when you pick that watch up, that you feel an emotion picking it up, which I always find quite impressive with Rolex and like Tudor to a certain extent, and Christopher Ward Lightcatcher case as well.
Yeah, you're not going to find that magic when you pick up that AliExpress homage. I promise you that. It can look like it, and they have stolen the design. The feel in hand it's light years apart. And Christopher Ward is a very good, I was thinking about them too. It doesn't have to be a Rolex fanboy conversation, because that, when you pick up one of their watches, it feels in hand every bit as robust and serious and solid as a Tudor or a Rolex. In my opinion, there was a friend of mine who's very well-to-do, and he had never seen a Christopher Ward, but he'd heard about them. And when he held mine in his hand, he goes, "Oh, I'm on the bandwagon now." And I mean, he bought a 12 almost immediately after we had met, because there's something, and it's hard to describe, but I wish you could explain it to people. There's not a way to describe when you hold it, and the closest I can describe it is, when people like jingly jangly and they show the sound of like a rattly bracelet. There is a tone of thickness when a Christopher Ward bracelet kind of clicks, where you're like, oh, that's different. There's something. It's richer. It's like a warmer sound when the metal hits. That's all I can describe it. There's you're like, this is markedly different than anything I've gotten from Seiko or from any other brand, where you're like, this feels like substantial.
What's interesting as well, I'm not a particular fan of the 12 for my personal taste, but the bracelet, when you first came out, I was like, oh, it looks a bit like a Chapek, and then there's other watch companies that have that similar bracelet that articulates in that way. But being a reviewer and seeing a lot of those watches that do that, somebody once told me, when I first moved to America, they asked me whether I'd ever had pumpkin pie, and I was like, oh, I haven't had it. And they're like, there is a fine line between the best pumpkin pie you've ever had in your life and the worst pumpkin pie you've ever had in your life. There's like a fine line between the two, and that is the same with those bracelets, because if they are a couple of microns off or hundredths of a millimeter off, those bracelets will rip your hair straight out of your wrist because of the way they articulate. So there is a lot of credit that needs to be given for just something that most people will never notice. It's one of those things that you won't notice until you get one that isn't made that way, and it literally rips the hair out of your arm. Those integrated bracelet, the way they articulate.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's been considered as Christopher Ward does their design process, where they think about every step of the way. I mean, again, I think I'm still fascinated by the fact that they went in and recorded the sound of the bezel click of Rolex, so that their watches had that same tone. You're like, they're thinking about every step of the way, how to make the watch that is, wow, I feel like I have something, even if I didn't have to spend $10,000.
Absolutely. Well, we've given Christopher Ward another plug on the podcast.
Yep. Welcome back to Christopher Ward Podcast.
Christopher Ward Talk. Awesome. Well, guys, we're really interested to know whether you like our picks. Maybe leave your picks in the comment section down below. And don't forget to email us or send us a DM on Instagram, Casual Watch Reviews on Instagram, and then leave us a comment on your favorite app, Spotify, give us a follow. We really appreciate you listening, and we'll catch you next time.
See you soon.